Hi, welcome back. I'm Denise,
I'm Lisa.
and we're the Outback Sisters.
Welcome to our blog on various people in history. Mainly, we're pointing against using women as our focus and Australian women. And today we have found a woman who I actually have never heard of, which is the best way to start, isn't it? Her name is Eliza Maud or Elsie Inglis. If you want me to, Denise, I'll get started straight away.
Get started, sure.
Okay, right. Eliza Maud or Elsie Inglis was born on the 16th of August, 1864, and she passed away on the 26th of November, 1917. She was a Scottish medical doctor, surgeon, teacher, a suffragist, and a founder of the Scottish Women's Hospital. She was the first woman to hold a Serbian Order of the White Eagle. I'm not sure what kind of order that is, but we might look it up another time. Inglis was born 16th of August 1864 at the hill station town of Nani Tal, British India. Inglis was one of had 8 siblings and was the second daughter of the third youngest. And the third that was the second daughter of the first youngest. Anyway, she was the second daughter and third youngest. Her parents were Harriet Lowes Thompson and John Forbes David Inglis, a magistrate who worked on the Indian Civil Service as Chief Commissioner of Oud through the East India Company, as did her maternal grandfather. Inglis's parents considered the education of a daughter as important as they do a son, and also had them schooled in India. Elsie and her sister Eva had 40 dolls, which were used to treat for spots or measles. She had them painted on. That's so cute.
As we all did.
Yeah.
Inglis's father was religious and used his position in India to encourage native economic development. He spoke out against infanticide and promoted female education. Inglis's maternal grandfather was Reverend Henry Simpson of Chapel of Goriah in Aberdeenshire. She was a cousin to the gynecologist Sir Henry Simpson, as well as fellow female medical pioneer Grace Cadell.
There's quite an ancestry going on there. Inglis's father retired when he was 56, when the East India Company from the East India Company to return to Edinburgh via Tasmania, where some of her elder siblings settled. Inglis went on to a private education in Edinburgh, where she had led a successful demand by the schoolgirls to use private gardens in Charlotte Square. And finished school in Paris, Inglis decided to study medicine, which was I'm sorry, I have to re-say that one. She finished school in Paris. Inglis's decision to study medicine was delayed by nursing her mother during her last illness of scarlet fever. Her death in 1885, when she felt obliged to stay in Edinburgh with her father.
In 1887, the Edinburgh School of Medicine for Women was opened by Dr. Sophia Jeffs Blake, and Inglis started her studies there. In reaction to Blake's methods, and after 2 fellow students, Grace and Georgina Cadell, were expelled, Inglis and her father founded the Edinburgh College of Medicine for Women under the auspices of the Scottish Association for the Medical Education of Women, whose sponsors included Sir William Muir, a friend of her father from India, now principal of the University of Edinburgh. Inglis's sponsors also arranged clinical training for female students under Sir William McEwen at the Glasgow Royal Infirmary.
In 1892, she obtained the triple qualification, becoming I've never heard this one, a licentiate of the Royal College of Physicians in Edinburgh and Royal College of Surgeons Edinburgh, and the faculty of physicians and surgeons of Glasgow. She was concerned at the low standard of care and lack of a specialisation in the needs of female patients, and so obtained a post at Elizabeth Garrett Anderson's pioneering new hospital for women in London, and then at the Rotunda in Dublin, a leading maternity hospital. Inglis gained her MBCHM qualification in 1899 from the University of Edinburgh after it opened its medical courses for women. Her return to Edinburgh to start this course had coincided with nursing her father in his final illness before he died on the 4th of March in 1894, aged 73. Inglis at the time noted that he did not believe that death was the stopping place, but that one would go on growing and learning through all eternity. Inglis later acknowledged that whatever I am, whatever I have done, I owe it all to my father.
Inglis's career began when she returned to Edinburgh in 1894 and completed her medical degree and became a lecturer in gynecology at the Medical College for Women, and then set up a medical practice with Jessie McLaren McGregor, who had been a fellow student. Considering that women and children's medicine was under-resourced, they opened a maternity hospital named The Hospice for poor women alongside a midwifery resource and training centre, initially in George Square. The hospice was then provided with an accident and general service as well as maternity, and an operating theatre and 8 beds in new premises at 219 High Street on the Royal Mile, close to Cockburn Street, and was the forerunner of the Elsie Inglis Memorial Maternity Hospital. In 1913, Inglis travelled across to the USA, she went to Michigan, to visit and learn from a new type of maternity hospital.
She often waived the fees owed to her and would pay for her patients to recuperate by seaside. With polio being a particular childhood illness, Inglis was a consultant at Bruntsfield Hospital, a nearby hospital for women and children, and the hospice merged with them in 1910. Inglis' surgical skills was recognised by colleagues as she was quiet, calm and collected, and never at a loss, skillful in her manipulations and able to cope with any emergency. Inglis lived and was in relationship for some time with Flora Murray, a fellow doctor and suffragette.
Executive Committee of the Scottish Federation of National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies in 1913. Okay, that was the picture. That shouldn't have been read.
Sorry, I highlighted something for Denise to read. And
her dissatisfaction with the standard of medical care available to women led her to the political activism through the suffrage movement. She was the secretary of the Edinburgh National Society for Women's Suffrage in the 1890s, supported by her father. And while she was working toward her medical degree, Inglis worked closely with Millicent Fawcett, the leader of the National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies, speaking at events all over the country. By 1906, Elsie Inglis was to the Scottish groups what Mrs. Fawcett was to the English, when they too formed themselves that year into a federation. It was Elsie who became its secretary. From the early years of the Scottish Federation of Women's Suffrage Society, Inglis was honorary secretary from 1906 and continued in this role right up to 1914.
Inglis spoke in support of suffrage in 1907 with Crystal Macmillan and Alice Lowe as fellow speakers at an NUWSS meeting in Edinburgh Cafe Oak Hall. Jessie Scott from New Zealand, where women already had the vote, was also a guest speaker. A century later, in the Lancet, Elsie Inglis, a relative, noted Inglis had said fate had not placed her in the van of a great movement and was a keen fighter. Inglis's personal style was described by fellow suffragist Sarah Mayer as courteous, sweet voice, and with eyes of a seer, a radiant smile when her lips were not firmly closed, with a fixity of purpose which as would warn off unwarranted opposition or objections.
Although she had already turned 50 at the start of the First World War, it was during the war that she made her mark. Despite government resistance, Inglis established the Scottish Women's Hospitals for Foreign Service Committee, an organisation funded by the women's suffrage movement to provide all female staffed relief hospitals for the Allied war effort, including doctors and technical staff, and others, including nurses and transport staff, and others as volunteers.
Inglis wanted a neutral home in order to attract wide support from men and women, but was able to use her connections to the suffrage movement to raise money for what became the Scottish Women's Hospital, the SWH. Inglis approached to the Scottish Red Cross to help with funding, but with the head of the Scottish Red Cross, Sir George Beatson, denied Inglis' request, stating that the Red Cross was in the hands of the War Office and he could have nothing to say at a hospital staffed by women. To start the project, she opened a fund with £100 of her own money. Millicent Fawcett of NUWSS took up the cause and invited Inglis to speak about the SWH in London, and by the next month, Inglis had her first £1,000. The goal was $50,000. Collection boxes had the NUWSS logo in small print. One is held at the National Museum of Scotland.
Eventually, the organisation was active in sending 14 teams to Belgium, France, Serbia, and Russia. When Inglis approached the Royal Army Medical Corps to offer them a ready-made medical unit staffed by qualified women, the War Office told her, "My good lady, go home and sit still." It was instead the French government that took up her offer and established a unit in France, and then she led her own unit in Serbia. Inglis was involved in all aspects of the organisation. Oh, far out. Just talk amongst yourselves for a minute while I find where I was up to.
Just go, it was instead the French government that took up her offer.
It was instead the French government?
Yeah.
It was instead the French government that took up her offer. Inglis was all, I read that. The French hospital was based at the Abbey of Royaumont and was run by Francis Ivans from January 1915 to March 1919. Inglis had initially offered a 100-bed hospital, but it grew to 600 beds as it coped with the severity of the battles, including that of the Somme.
Inglis went to the teams sent to Serbia to work on improving hygiene, which reduced typhus and other epidemics there. On the journey, she was to enjoy a last peaceful day. I'm going to have to pause. Inglis went with the team sent to Serbia to work on improving hygiene, which reduced typhus and other epidemics there. On her journey, she was to enjoy a last peaceful day of sunshine and starlight on the voyage. The typhus outbreak in Serbia affected the hospital and eventually took the lives of 4 of the SWH staff, including nurses with whom the coronavirus pandemic hospital in Glasgow was later named after in 2020.
That's Nurse Louisa Jordan.
Yeah, I know. 4 SWH units in Serbia were established, but in 1915, Inglis was captured when the Austro-Hungarian and German forces took over the region. As she had stayed behind with others to repatriate the wounded, Inglis was taken prisoner when at Kruševac Hospital in Serbia. Inglis and others were repatriated via neutral Switzerland in February 1916. But upon reaching Scotland, she at once began organising funds for a Scottish women's hospital team in Russia. This woman was non-stop. She headed the Scots team when it left in August 1916 for Odessa, Russia. She had appointed two fellow Scottish suffragists, Mary
Whatever.
Henderson as admin and Evelina Haverfield as commandant for the new unit. The two SWH units were overcome in the chaos of a retreat when Inglis travelled via Dobroja, I think it's called. I think that's how you say that one, and Braila, and in the Danube, with the people in flight, including families, doctors, soldiers, and a Romanian officer who had been in Glasgow and knew British customs. The Scottish women's journey and challenging experiences in Serbia were shared by her administrator Henderson and in national and local press, and in fundraising talks once she returned home. Inglis was said in the chaos to think of her homeland there, quiet, strong, and invincible behind everything and everyone.
At Braila, with just 6 other doctors, only one surgeon, Inglis and the team were treating 11,000 wounded soldiers and sailors. A letter in tribute to Inglis in the name of the Russian citizen soldiers was written at Easter to express in their words, I quote, express our sincere gratitude for all care and attention bestowed on us, and we bow low before the tireless and wonderful work of yourself and your personnel, which we see every day directed towards the good of the soldiers allied to your country, end quote. Inglis got the news that her nephew was shot in the head and blinded on the day that she was leaving for Ukraine. She questioned the eternal battle of good and evil referred to in wartime when she wrote her sister, expressing her sorrow for her nephew, ending with, and I quote, "We are just here in it, and whatever we lose, it is for the right we are standing. It is all terrible and awful, and I don't believe we can disentangle it all our minds just now. The only thing is just to go on doing our bit," end quote. Inglis, an indomitable little figure, lasted another summer in Russia before she too was forced to return in poor health to the United Kingdom, dying almost on arrival because she was suffering from bowel cancer. On her final journey, she was seen to stand on deck, saying farewell to each of the Serb officers being evacuated in quiet dignity. Inglis died on the 22nd of November. What?
You're right, keep going. Okay, sorry. Oh, good.
Inglis died on the 26th of November 1917, and that was only the day after she arrived back in Britain. She had her sisters at her bedside at the Station Hotel, Newcastle upon Tyne. Inglis's body lay in state at St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh, and her funeral there on the 29th of November was attended by British and Serbian royalty. The services included Alleluia Chorus and The Last Post, played by the buglers of the Royal Scots. The streets were lined with people as her coffin went through Edinburgh to be buried at the Dean's Cemetery. The Scotsman newspaper wrote that it was an occasion, and I quote, an occasion of an impressive public tribute, unquote. Winston Churchill said of Inglis and her nurses, and I quote, "They will shine in history." In London,
a subsequent memorial service attended by the members of the royal family of Britain and Serbia was held at St Margaret's Church in Westminster, the Anglican parish church of the House of Commons in the United Kingdom. Inglis is buried in the north section of Dean Cemetery in a corner north of the central path. Her parents, John Forbes David Inglis and Harriet Lowes Thomas, as well as her cousin, Sir Henry Simpson, lie nearby in the same cemetery.
A memorial fountain was erected in her memory in Mladovac, Serbia. Commemorating her work for the country, a plaque marking her pre-war surgery from 1898 to 1914 was erected at 8 Walker Street, Edinburgh. A portrait of her is included in the mural of Heroic Women by Walter P. Starmer, unveiled in 1921 in the Church of St Jude on the Hill in Hampstead Garden, suburb London. In 1922, a large tablet to her memory, sculpted by Pilkington Jackson, was erected in the north aisle of St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh.
The main physical memorial was the building of the Elsie Inglis Memorial Maternity Hospital in 1925, which was operational until 1988. Many Edinburgh children were born there during the 20th century. It was closed by the National Health Services in 1988 and sold off. Part of it now is an old people's home, part is private housing, and parts have been demolished. It is no longer recognisable as the hospital, at its closure. I'm sorry, I keep getting a message. At its closure, there were public protests that a new maternity unit should have been named after her, which has not yet happened, and that was in the year 2020. Small plaque to Elsie Inglis exists near the southwest corner of the entrance to Hollywood Park. A nursing career developing scheme in the NHS Lothian is called the Elsies.
Inglis was commemorated on a new series of banknotes issued by the Clydesdale Bank in 2009. Her image appeared on the new issue of £50 notes. In March 2015, the British residence in Belgrade was named Elsie Inglis House in recognition of her work in the country. The ceremony was conducted by the President of Serbia, Tomislav Nikolic, and the UK Ambassador Denis Keith said.
Elsie Inglis was one of the first women in Scotland who finished higher education and was a pioneer of medicine. She fought energetically against prejudice of social and political emancipation of women in Britain. She was also a tireless volunteer, courageous organiser of the Scottish Women's Hospital, and dedicated humanitarian. Fortunately, Elsie Inglis didn't live long enough to see the triumph of some of her ideas, but she has had a tremendous influence on social trends in our country. In Scotland, she became a doctor. In Serbia, she became a saint. In 2020, it was noted that Serbia's first palliative care hospital was also named after Elsie Inglis.
In November 2017, a memorial plaque to Elsie Inglis and 15 women who died as a result of their service to the Scottish Women's Hospitals was set in Edinburgh Central Library. Inglis's name and picture and those of 58 other women's suffrage supporters are on the plinth at the statue of Millicent Fawcett in Parliament Square, London, unveiled in 2018. The Women's Roll of Honour plaque in York Minster also includes Inglis's name. Inglis's younger sister, Eva Helen Shaw McLaren, wrote her biography, Elsie Inglis, The Woman with a Torch, in 1920, and in 2009 a coloured illustration edition was published. A reference is to Florence Nightingale, known as the Lady with the Lamp. Project Gutenberg has published the former book.
In Eva's papers were found an unpublished manuscript novel by Inglis, The Story of a Modern Woman, whose heroine Hildegard Forrest may be seen as autobiographical in part. And in a boating accident, the narrator says, in a sudden flash, she suddenly realised she wasn't a coward. She was described as one of the greatest ever Scottish women, a great role model, and someone who young Scots could be proud of. A journalist called unsuccessfully on the Scottish minister to Edinburgh Royal Hospital for young children and young women after Elsie.
So Winston Churchill wrote of the SWH, quote, "No body of women has won a higher reputation in the Great War. Their work, lit up by the frame of Dr. Inglis, will shine in history." The Lord Provost of Edinburgh launched a plan to make a permanent memorial to Inglis in the city in November 2021. There are more than 43 statues of men in Edinburgh city centre, but only 2 statues of women. And on the Royal Mile itself, the site of Elsie's statue, there are 12 statues of men, and Elsie will be the first statue of a woman. There was a campaign to raise £47,000 funding for the
memorial statue, virtual tours through QR codes on the statue, and other ways to commemorate a truly revered and treasured figure in Edinburgh's history.
As part of this campaign, an event was held by Girl Guiding Scotland on the 5th of March 2022 in the Meadows in Edinburgh. This event was a sponsored sit still with lots of activities sitting still, such as badge making, first aid, and making a shelter from sticks. At this event, there was also a bespoke Elsie Inglis bus tour provided by Edinburgh Bus Tours that visited areas linked to Elsie Inglis around Edinburgh. This event was to raise funds for the memorial statue for Elsie, raising awareness and inspiring the people of Girl Guiding Scotland to do anything they put anything they put their mind to. Girl Guiding Scotland also created an Elsie Inglis challenge pack. Girl Guiding Scotland also created an accompanying badge for when members complete some activities in the challenge pack.
Okay, that's it for today. She was a very interesting one, this woman. I'm sorry I jumped around a little bit. And she obviously wasn't from Australia, which I thought she was.
No, you made a bit of a blue there, didn't you?
Sorry, guys. All kudos to Edinburgh. She was a wonderful woman who...
A Scottish lady.
She would have died in absolute pain. Bowel cancer, we've known from other probably family members, is very painful, and they wouldn't have had the kind of treatment. And she went up till the day she died. Day before she died, she was still up and around, which she was a brave lady and did such a lot. Can't believe how much she was doing. And yet
who knows of her? Who knows of her? Yeah.
It's sad that these women slip through. Yeah.
Yeah, it is very. So thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see you again.
Yeah. And if you're in Scotland, go and have a look at the statues. I bet they're lovely. I bet they're memorials. I'd love to see them. Might look online later and see what they are. Yeah. All right, guys, we'll catch up with you around the track, and maybe one day we might even stick up one about the Lady of the Lamp. Nightingale.
Sure.
She's a very interesting one, but a lot have done hers.
Makes a lot of good sense, though.
Yeah, to follow on.
All right, then.
Take care, everyone, and
see you, Lisa.
Subscribe. See you, Denise.
Oh, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and everything.
Definitely. I'm always
see you, Lisa.
Bye-bye.
Bye.